Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's live conversation. It is an absolute honor to host a guest who has been one of the most influential voices in South African politics for decades. Today, we're joined by Helen Zille, former Premier of the Western Cape, former Mayor of Cape Town, and a long-standing advocate for constitutionalism, good governance, and principled politics in a time where South Africa is navigating coalition uncertainty, shifting political alliances, and deep debates about constitutional accountability. Her insights could not be more relevant. This is a conversation designed to bring clarity, perspective, and honest reflection. And we're incredibly grateful to have you, the audience, joining us live. How are you, Helen?
Well, Siddharth, thank you very much. It's holiday time creeping up on me, so I'm quite enjoying the anticipation.
Ah, lovely. Sorry about that. I'm just waiting for my questions to actually load on my
Load.
PC.
Yeah. How are
Yeah,
you
sorry about.
in the meantime?
I'm actually awesome. Hey, just
Mhm.
dealing with the unpredictable Durban, you know, weather. But actually, now that okay, I'm going to start with my first topic with you, which is actually on the constitutionalism. Which is, in your view, what are the biggest current threats to constitutionalism in South Africa, and what reforms or safeguards do you believe are most urgent?
Well, the biggest threat to constitutionalism is that corruption seems to be creeping into the judiciary. We've had a judge arrested for alleged corruption, for
Wow.
taking a large bribe to decide a particular court case in a particular way. Now, she has not yet been convicted, but it is very, very worrying when there is enough evidence to arrest a judge for corruption, obviously. And then it is equally worrying to read reports about Katie Molefe apparently getting bail because allegedly the judge who was hearing the bail application is corrupt. And exactly the way people predicted, Katie Molefe was granted bail, and he should never have been granted bail on the basis of the facts as most judicial experts would interpret them. So those kinds of things are very, very worrying indeed. They are allegations. You've got to wait for something to be proved. But when the judiciary becomes corrupt and corruption starts seeping in, and then more and more people become corrupt because they also want to make 2 million here and 2 million there, then you find that you might as well not have a constitution, because when you take elements of that constitution to the judiciary for interpretation, you don't know who's paying them off.
Wow. South Africa's constitution is often described as one of the most progressive in the world. Do you believe it still adequately supports the country's modern challenges, especially around governance, accountability, and service delivery?
I don't think anybody anticipated the level of corruption in the ANC and the level to which the ANC would sink. And so we all thought our constitution was great because we had President Mandela as the
Hmm.
president. But since we've shown just how corrupted the constitution can be, I think a very bad part of the constitution is the power it gives to politicians to appoint judges. And I think that that has to change dramatically. And I also think that the president has too many powers.
Hmm.
For example, when Jacob Zuma had to choose a national director of public prosecutions, he chose some very questionable characters. And we're seeing that process play itself out again with the same person. And so it is very, very worrying when you have corrupt politicians with powers under a constitution. Then nothing can really safeguard a society.
All right, we'll get to the coalition dynamics. With coalitions becoming the new norm in South African politics, what do you see as the key ingredients of a functional and stable coalition government?
Well, ideally, you must share broad principle and philosophical foundations. If you don't, it's very difficult. And if your coalition partners don't have any real philosophical or principled foundation, then it's very hard to make it work, because then people are just looking in what's in it for me, rather than
Hmm.
how can we advance the interests of the people and the well-being of the people more through our coalition. And that's a massive threat. And of course, The public have seen again and again when they vote for small parties, that's what they get.
What lessons, positive or negative, have you taken from the various coalition experiences in municipalities across the country?
Well, coalitions are never the first prize, never
Yeah,
the first prize. If you can get an overall majority, well, then you can govern and you can root out corruption and you can do the right thing and you can get results. But when you've got a coalition, you're always being held back and often for the worst possible reason. So, for example, if you're a coalition with a party and you want to, let's say, deal with corruption in the bureaucracy and they don't want you to do that, then what the officials do is they go behind your back, speak to your coalition partner, and persuade them to pull out to stop you implementing what you need to implement. So it puts a huge brake on governance. It's not a good idea at all, but it's a consequence of proportional representation, which is a good idea. I'm in favor, at least in part, of proportional representation. It's a very useful leveling mechanism in a democracy, but it has some very bad outcomes, one of which is complex coalitions and unstable government.
how can South African political parties move from antagonistic coalition behavior toward more principled, policy-based cooperation?
Well, that's up to the voters. I mean, if voters vote for parties that they know have strong principles, strong values, and good policies, then it's possible. But until then, if voters just vote for this one or that one because they don't like this and they don't like that and they do like that, without actually looking at the history, the track record, whether they've got experience in government, what their values are like, well, we're going to have this again and again, and it's for the voters to decide.
True. We'll get to the governance and accountability. What governance failures do you believe stem from political culture rather than policy, and how can these be addressed meaningfully?
Well, culture is a very complex question in South Africa, and anytime you raise the question of culture, you are taking your life in your hands or your political life in your hands in South Africa, because to attribute anything to culture is very, very dangerous. I keep on wondering why we have become such a corrupt country. That really puzzles me. It really worries me. And I never thought that was part of South Africa's political culture. But it seems that it has become so. And that is a very stressful thing indeed.
Yeah. How can public trust in political leadership to be rebuilt, especially among young South Africans who increasingly feel politically disengaged?
Well, it depends on how people govern. I mean, you must look at their track record. You must look if they've been ethical. You must look if they've told the truth against the odds. You must look as if they've ever been able to govern a sphere of government and produce results. And again, it's up to the voters. I mean, they must look at the individual politicians and the politicians' lists. None of them are perfect. None of them ever will be perfect because these are human beings on this planet and nobody's perfect. But the fact is, some parties have a track record, others don't. Some have governed well, some have a depth of leadership, others don't. And, voters must make an informed choice.
All right. We'll get to the future of the opposition. What qualities do you believe the next generation of opposition leaders must embody to remain relevant in a rapidly changing political landscape?
Well, at any time and in any place, what you want is integrity. What you want is a grounding in a clear political philosophy and strong principles. What you want is a commitment to service and not to status of leadership. What you want is personal modesty and not the extreme performative nature of wealth and high value motor vehicles and the ridiculous amount spent on clothing and other trappings of status and culture. These are very, very corrosive and they lie at the root of a lot of corruption. And yes, that's what you're looking for.
All right. Do you foresee a long-term realignment of South Africa's opposition politics, and what form do you believe that might take?
Well, not opposition politics. I mean, there's a long term realignment of politics per se. And you've seen what's happened in the ANC. I mean, they lost a little bit of themselves to COPE. They lost a little bit of themselves to the EFF. They lost a little bit of themselves to MK. And now they're in a coalition with us. I mean, that's all part of political realignment. It's not only about opposition politics realignment. In fact, it's actually mainly about governance where the realignment happens.
All right. Before I ask you my final question, are you okay if I give you a live comment question here?
Yeah, sure.
All right. This is from Reshaping. Hi, Helen. Good to have you on a pod. Corruption is a never-ending battle. What measures can be implemented in order to curb corruption?
Well, the best thing is sunlight. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. And what I say is that if there are oversight mechanisms, if there are mechanisms for transparency, if there are accountability mechanisms, then you have less chance of getting corrupt. But I'm afraid corruption in South Africa has become syndicated. That means that there are large groups of people involved in corruption. If you read Jeff Wicks's book on Babito Deokaran, you will see that right from the very entry level of clerks in the Tembisa hospital, right through to the head of the health department, with nurses and mid-level officials in between, was a whole chain of corruption. And that makes it much more difficult to deal with. Dealing effectively with corruption must require at least a level of integrity in a system. And when everybody is corrupt, it becomes syndicated, or almost everybody is corrupt. I don't want to say everybody is corrupt, but very, very many people become corrupt. Then everybody tries and gets in on the bandwagon. And those who are not corrupt quickly get worked out and sidelined and marginalized. And that's what's happened, you see. So we need a really strong and powerful new broom that can get systems in place that prevent corruption and hold corruption to account. And that's what we're undertaking to do in Johannesburg.
Yeah. All right. My final question to you is looking back on your decade in public life, what key moment most shaped your thinking about the future of South Africa's political system, and how does that insight apply today? Today.
Well, I think there have been several moments. I mean, when the charges against Jacob Zuma were withdrawn, I knew they should never have been withdrawn. And I knew that was political pressure on the National Prosecuting Authority. And when a National Prosecuting Authority becomes subject to political pressure, then you know that people are being charged or acquitted on the basis of political influence. And that is dramatically bad for a democracy. So that was one big moment for me when I thought our constitution would unravel. And then, of course, I come back to the question of alleged corruption in the judiciary. We need a massive overhaul of our criminal justice system. And Glynis Breitenbach has proposed some very excellent bills. I call them the Breitenbach bills, to set up a very powerful anti-corruption institution in government, and with the right mechanisms, the right processes, and the right independence. And I think that's what's going to be necessary. We have a very, very threatened and fragile criminal justice system, and that's what we need to strengthen at all costs.
All I got to say that thanks so much for your time, and I hope to catch up with you soon in the future, and best of luck for Joburg.
Thanks very much. It's been good to speak to you, Siddharth. Go well. Bye.